Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today for our first masterclass of 2026. It's great that you could all join us, and we see you all filing in there. So for those that don't know me, my name is Oisin Gill. I'm leading the World Food Forum Youth Education Program at the Global Youth Action Initiative and FAO's Office of Youth and Women. So you're very welcome to today's masterclass. Today we're joined for masterclass on multi-stakeholder collaboration for agri-food systems transformation, leveraging youth leadership. This will be delivered by our colleagues in FAO's agri-food systems and food safety division. So we look forward to that session, to welcoming you all and to learning from our colleagues and with all of you today. A reminder throughout the session today, you'll be able to use the chat and the Q&A function to raise any questions throughout the webinar that you have during the presentations and the discussions, and then we'll come back to them towards the end as well when we have some time. But before we go into the session, just to provide a bit of context as well for our work here and what we do. This is as I mentioned, the first masterclass that we have within our education program this year. This masterclasses are supporting the learning sessions for our agri-food leadership education program, but they're open to all of you and to the public as well to learn from FAO colleagues and learn about the work that we do. It's great that you're all able to join us for this. And for this year, these masterclass sessions, we'll be looking at, we'll also be focusing on young women's empowerment for the ALEP program, Young Women's Empowerment. This is in recognition of the International Year of the Woman Farmer, which is happening throughout 2026. So we look forward to seeing you all throughout these sessions. Remember, if you do attend a minimum of 3 sessions, you'll be able to get a certificate as well for these master classes. So do stay connected with all of the updates that we'll be sending through our newsletters, through our social media as well, and you'll be able to see more about what those master classes have in store as well for you this year. So we look forward to learning with you, look forward to learning from you and to discussions that are about to happen in 2026. So thanks a lot for joining us. Without further ado, I'll then pass over to our first speakers and our colleagues in the Agri-Food Systems and Food Safety Division. And our first speaker then is Siobhan Kelly. Siobhan is an agribusiness economist with FAO's Agri-Food Systems and Food Safety Division. She currently leads FAO's work on policy making for agri-food systems transformation, including on themes related to multi-stakeholder and private sector engagement, policy, agenda setting, and implementation. She also has expertise in agri-food value chain development, including the role of agri-food SMEs in rural transformation. So over to you, Siobhan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oisin, for that great introduction. So I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully that will work out okay. So I'm not seeing my presentation, sorry. Okay, colleagues, do you mind if you could share the screen from your end? I apologize, for some reason.
Yeah, I can.
The presentation isn't coming up.
I can do it.
Even though we trialed it earlier. Thanks so much, Pablo.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so before we actually delve into the topic of multi-stakeholder collaboration and engagement in agri-food systems, I'm going to give a brief overview of the topic of agri-food systems and how FAO defines agri-food systems, and how also the topic of agri-food systems has evolved over the decades in the work that we do with governments and with stakeholders in member states. And then lastly, I'll discuss what a systems approach is for agri-food systems transformation, making reference to a recent and seminal publication by the organization on an approach. So next slide, please. So what do we mean by agri-food systems transformation? Well, the definition by FAO states that it encompasses the entire range of actors and the interlinked activities involved in the production, that is, so growing, fishing, harvesting, that's also taking into consideration pastoralism, forestry as well, and how that foods and how those agri-food products are processed, are packaged, are transported. So the people and the livelihoods that are involved and all those actors, then moving on to how those agri-food products are then distributed, how they're traded, how they're prepared, eaten, consumed, disposed, and reused, and then the circle goes again. So it's very encompassing. And also just to say that in some instances, there's reference made to food systems, but in FAO, it's the mention of agri, and the role of agriculture is very, not only symbolic, but also very telling, because it is to make reference and to ensure that the role of the farmer, that the role of those actors close to the farm gate are not forgotten in the realm and the dialogues related to food systems or agri-food systems. Next slide, please. So when we think of the topic of agri-food systems, in development and in policy, there can be fatigue in terms of different concepts and different approaches that emerge. And when the topic of agri-food systems began to emerge and began to take hold, there were some comments in terms of, okay, here we go again with another trend or another concept. But I think it's very interesting to look at how the topic has evolved over the decades. And this is just a very brief overview of, if we look back to the 1970s, when we're talking and when FAO was during that period, the support it was providing to governments and to stakeholders is very much focused on agriculture production, increasing production per se, for food security. And then over the decades, we've seen that evolved to really the realization and the acknowledgement that food security and nutrition is not only dependent on increasing and improving and ensuring that agri-food production is sustainable, but that it hinges on as well very much on the different livelihoods around the farm, around secondary towns, around urban places, and the different activities and the trajectory and journey that agri-food products make between the farm and the market to the consumer. And back again. So it's been an evolving paradigm over the decades. Next slide, please. So the challenge is, however, that within for many countries and in their fight against hunger and malnutrition, that environmental degradation, that issues related to rural employment, that inequality of gender inequality, the exclusion of youth, the exclusion of older generations, all impinge on achieving the goal of food security and nutrition. And so they all need to be, and it really complicates the policy development process and the program delivery from governments. So next slide, please. So really, this is one of the challenges that we face are this kind of sectoral structure that governments have in tackling hunger, in the sense that governments are organized according to health, according to agriculture, according to trade, according to infrastructure, finance, and so forth. But we need all of those to tackle the goal of zero hunger. Next slide, please. And this is where a systems approach comes in. And this is where this seminal publication comes in. Next slide, please, which is grounded in science and is very much communicated in a way that's very digestible for policymakers and stakeholders because it makes links and provides examples to countries and the experiences that countries are undertaking in working in a more systemic way. So the 5 steps, or the 6 steps rather, in this approach begins with systems thinking. So really looking at how the system vision is developed at the national level, the subnational level, how agri-food system strategies are development. Then it moves on to systems knowledge. So looking at how all the data and the evidence is gathered and feeds into that visionary process and that strategic process. Then systems government. So really how the different actors, and that's exactly what Pablo is going to dive deep on, how those different actors come in and influence that. Systems doing is the core. It's like how that lands in the territory, how all of that strategy, plans, investment are delivered on the ground to address food insecurity and malnutrition. Systems investing. So where is the investment going to come from? Public, private, philanthropy, the different sources of investment and how they're all coordinated. And then systems learning, because as policies are rolled out, as programs are rolled out, we need to learn what's working, what's not working. So the report, you can access the report here, or if you actually go back just 3 slides, there's a QR code here. So you can scan that and download the publication, and that will give you lots more information, background knowledge, references, and country examples that are considered good practice in this area of work. So with that, I'll pass it back to Oisín, and yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to share with you this morning.
Great. Thanks a lot, Siobhan. Much appreciated for that overview as well of FAO's systems approach to agri-food systems. And I have shared the link as well, and my colleague Parmisha has shared a link to that publication. I would encourage you all to go and view it, interact with it, engage with that publication, see how it engages with your work. As well for the Agri-Food Leadership Education Program participants, and it will be important as well as you begin your journey to develop projects and look at connecting with your World Food Forum National Youth chapters, and that supporting this multi-stakeholder collaboration within the agri-food systems approach will become very important. And to learn a bit more about that, Pablo Garcia Campos will be sharing more information. So thanks very much. Over to you, Pablo.
Thank you so much, Oisín. Hello, everyone. A pleasure to be here. Before I begin with my presentation, I would like to do a little warm-up exercise. If you have used the Menti platform before, you know what to do. If you haven't used it before, please get your smartphone, take a picture of that QR code that will take you right into the exercise. Or if you don't have a smartphone with you, please type www.menti.com and please enter that code. As I give you a few seconds to get prepared, I'll go with the first question. And anyway, you have the code there in screen. So this is the first question that I would like you to answer. When you hear this term that we're going to be delving into today, multi-stakeholder collaboration, what ideas come to mind? We see some of them already appearing. Inclusion, team, system thinking, teamwork, not working in silos. Yeah, very interesting ideas. And yeah, I'm glad to see that most of these ideas that you are writing in the screen are concepts that we're going to be covering in the presentation. Excellent. We'll make sure to take a screenshot of this and we can share later. Beautiful. Okay, great. So I see that the ideas you have about the concept are correct. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it later on the presentation. The next question, and this is very relevant to those of you that are participating in this leadership program, because it will help you think about who you have engaged with before, what are the groups of actors that you have collaborated with in your past work, and maybe make you reflect about which ones maybe you haven't collaborated with, and we will give you some tips later in the presentation on how to maybe strengthen your work with those that you haven't worked in the past, but also get some ideas on how you can maybe coordinate and start new collaboration with new constituencies. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And now, without further ado, I am going to share my presentation for the lecture. Okay. Almost there. And there we go. Please give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation properly. Thank you. Okay, no, so as I said, Oisin, well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. I will be delivering this masterclass today, but please let me, before I begin, say thank you as well to my colleagues for their contributions to the concept and the shaping of this presentation. So I can, of course, thank you to my colleague Pramisha Zapalilla, Shivon Kelly, Elena Ilie, Francesca Felici, Priti Koirala. This presentation is, of course, the result of a team effort. And to those of you here today, well, I hope the main goal today is to learn something new. And please, if you have any questions, write them down in the Q&A section or in the chat, because we will hopefully have some time at the end to discuss. Shivon has outlined how the complex and interconnected challenges we face call for a systems approach, and how FAO's new framework can help governments and practitioners address those challenges. And one of the 6 elements of this systems approach is systems governance. And as Shivon mentioned, we could say that multi-stakeholder collaboration, the focus of this masterclass, is a key ingredient of this systems governance. Although, as you will see throughout the presentation, it is also relevant for the operationalization of other components of the systems approach too. We can begin with a definition where you can already see some of the keywords that you have written in the Menti exercise. So we define multi-stakeholder collaboration as a joint effort amongst actors from 2 or more spheres of society. And we will see, we will delve a bit more later into which are these actors, with many different objectives, that could vary, and it could be one, it could be many, and this could be pooling resources together, sharing risks and responsibilities to solve a common issue, handle a topic, to elaborate perhaps a vision, realize common objectives, manage common resources, or maybe also, but not necessarily, but perhaps ensuring the protection, production, or delivery of an outcome. And it's important to mention that collaboration, we don't consider it an end in itself, but rather a path or a process that helps us achieve our goals related to the sustainability of agri-food systems. And a caveat, of course, to consider, as with any other topic, the way we implement and manage our collaborative intervention matters. Obviously, success is not guaranteed, What's more, in some cases, for example, bringing all the stakeholders together might not be the best solution. And we can think about clear examples, as in armed conflicts or extremely polarized environment. This is something that you need to keep in mind when implementing multi-stakeholder collaboration initiatives. And here on the screen, we have some examples of different forms a multi-stakeholder collaboration can take. Some of you might be familiar with the Food Systems Summit dialogues. These were convened by the United Nations in 2020 towards on the road to the United Nations Food Systems Summit that took place in 2021. And it brought together many actors in countries, and together they developed these so-called national pathways for food systems transformation, which were a set of actions and priorities to increase the sustainability in all these dimensions of agri-food systems. Another example from the local level is the Municipal Committee for Food Security of La Paz. And this brings actors under the umbrella of a civil society organization. So it's actually not a government-led initiative, but it definitely has the buy-in of the government. And it has managed to be an important space because of all the voices that they represent. And in conversations in previous events with the coordinator of this space, we have heard a very important message, which is that perhaps not all the actors participating in this space are technically experts in the topic of food security, but their collaboration together makes the space a very respected technical space. And another example that you can find in all your countries are public-private partnerships, generally speaking. These are collaborations or partnerships between government institutions, public agencies, with businesses of different sizes and different focus to solve a specific issue. And here I'm going to highlight some practical and tightly interconnected benefits of multi-stakeholder collaboration. Why is multi-stakeholder collaboration important? So firstly, multi-stakeholder collaboration can help policymakers or practitioners in that difficult step that is passing from planning to action. For example, in a policy development process, involving multiple sectors and stakeholders in the design phase can create a common understanding and alignment towards common goals that has a positive impact in the operationalization of the plan. By convening a variety of actors with mandates in their work around different pillars of sustainability, socioeconomic, environmental, and also food security and nutrition, we can get closer to a balanced progress on both those socioeconomic and environmental dimensions. And this links a lot with the management of unintended consequences, what we call in the jargon trade-offs. And it helps to move the needle as well towards agri-food policies that are aligned to other non-agri-food policies. So, for example, how coherent are our agricultural policies with health policies? Are the products that are being produced, processed, sold healthy, and do they contribute to health outcomes? Another benefit is on the support for implementation. So while at an initial stage of a collaboration, there could be additional cost linked to the meetings and all the time that is needed to coordinate, bringing people together. That coordination can actually help unlock opportunities to, for example, pool resources or promote efficient investments in the implementation phases. And finally, also linked to the implementation phase is the important component of consensus building. While it is impossible, obviously, to have everyone fully aligned on everything, the involvement of multiple stakeholders in the process helps to build a shared understanding of why a certain policy, for example, is put in place, or why work is being conducted on a specific area. So we always say that knowing how we got there helps build acceptance for difficult or out-of-the-box decisions, no? Like those that you participating in this program, I'm sure will be designing. So the framework and guidelines for multi-stakeholder collaboration that I'm sharing today are based on a publication that you see on the screen entitled Rethinking Our Food Systems, a guide for multi-stakeholder collaboration. This is a publication that is the result of the partnership between 3 UN agencies under the umbrella of the One Planet Network, and with the contribution from a group of experts from various organizations who reviewed multiple drafts of the publication and also contributed with some of the examples, practical examples, but also some of the tools and methodologies that are included in the guide. So the guide is designed to be practical and it's designed to be an easy to read document. And I honestly encourage you to use it when you design your interventions, both as part of this program, but also in your future roles. And there you can take a picture in the of the QR code to download it, but also my colleagues, I'm sure they will be pasting the link in the chat soon. So the guide is structured in 5 modules, which are summarized here. And we're going to go one by one together today. Each module has a theoretical section that is complemented by practical examples and links to an Annex 1, where you can find a long list of tools to use in specific contexts. And an important consideration is that although we have numbered the modules 1 to 5, in your initiatives, certain elements might be fixed, so you can skip sections that are not relevant. Or you can start from section 3 if you think that the first 2 sections are not something that you can influence, for example. And finally, there is an Annex 2 in the guide as well that includes a very easy to follow self-assessment on the different aspects of multi-stakeholder collaboration. So on with the building block 1, entitled Fostering Broad Multi-Stakeholder Participation. In this first module, we explain the importance of involving different stakeholders to ensure the legitimacy of initiatives from the public sector to the private sector, passing by the ones that you see in the screen: civil society, various actors of the value chains, academia, media, and others. And in addition to ensuring the participation of actors from different areas of society, it's also important to consider geographical representation, for example, from local to national level, and multi-sectoral representation, so including representatives from various sectors related to agri-food systems. And this can range from the more obvious ones, such as agriculture, health, environment, but also to some very important ones that sometimes they are taken for granted but are essential for the implementation of initiatives, which are finance, education, youth, and others that are maybe a bit more out of the box, but will be important sometimes, like the sector of sports. So there are, of course, specific considerations for each of the stakeholder groups, but for this occasion, I have compiled some of the challenges that might be present when working towards the inclusivity of women and youth, which of course are important for this program, but they might or might not apply to your own experiences. And some of the challenges that sometimes we observed in the inclusivity of women and youth are the limited access that these groups might have to resources such as land, finance, and credit. That this can depend on economic, socioeconomic, cultural norms. Also, the underrepresented nature of these groups in formal governance structures, and also some decision-making processes. How sometimes these groups are over-engaged in informal economy or low skill or unpaid roles, which also hinders their representativity in those formal governance structures. And of course, gaps in the access to specialized training. And some solutions are presented to these challenges. For example, you can provide targeted financial and technical support to the initiatives of these actors. Regarding the underrepresentation, you could establish quotas and inclusive collaboration mechanisms. And for the underrepresentation of these groups within the broader agri-food systems, it's important also to support awareness of agri-food as a viable career path. And I'm sure that some of you are working on initiatives in this line. And lastly, and it's something that the World Food Forum is definitely working on, is fostering mentorship and capacity development to both women and youth. So the guide provides guidelines along with concrete tools to address a variety of topics regarding stakeholder mapping and analyzing stakeholders. But well, first of all, why you should conduct any mapping of stakeholders, So there are three main reasons. Doing a stakeholder mapping can help you clarifying the interests, the influences, the capabilities of different stakeholders to guide the process by which we engage them. It can also help identify groups or individuals that, although they are relevant, might have been dismissed in a what we call a usual suspects scenario. And mapping and analyzing stakeholders can also help mitigate challenges, such as those that are shown in the slide, like bureaucracy, conflicts of interest, sometimes situations of no trust between members. So the mapping can also anticipate win-win scenarios. So for example, spotting potential so-called champions, that could help move the process forward. And while conducting this type of mapping at the start of a collaborative process is crucial, it will be important that when you are working on initiatives that are active throughout the years, you see this as an ongoing process so that you can adapt the plans to your needs and possibilities throughout the years. And for example, the Committee on Food Security of the City of La Paz that I mentioned before carries this type of exercise every year, and they adapt their plans accordingly. Now on the building block 2, entitled Ensuring a Good Understanding of the Agri-Food System. So this second module focuses on understanding the agri-food systems in which we will be operating. As a fundamental part of designing plans and actions is the presence or the absence of knowledge. And in this regard, the guide emphasizes the importance of data and scientific evidence, as well as, very importantly, traditional knowledge and the knowledge of indigenous peoples. The diagram you see on the screen represents the conceptual framework of one of the methodologies recommended in the guide, which involves the analysis of key elements of the systems to extract insights and inform decision-making for strategies, policies, programs, etc. And some of the elements that you can see in the screen include, you got here the drivers of change, such as environmental, socioeconomic factors, as well as the influence of institutions, of public bodies, value change, which encompass all activities from production to consumption and waste management, as in that diagram that Siobhan has shown. And then we have the impacts of systems activities on environmental indicators such as soil erosion, socioeconomic indicators like employment, and food security and health indicators that can range from food availability to indicators on, for example, obesity. And lastly, it is also crucial to analyze the interactions and the feedback loops between different elements of the system, no? As well as the potential unintended consequences of certain actions on the rest of the system. And as you can imagine, this specific analysis can be resource and time intensive, very intensive actually, and analyzing all the elements and interactions might just be impossible. Therefore, you should take a few considerations when choosing your frameworks, and I'm explaining this in the next slide. These are some of the important considerations. So, for example, what's the geographical focus of your analysis? What level of detail do you need? It's important to understand that sometimes if we don't need a lot of detail, overpopulating our analysis and our reports on the state of our system might be counterproductive. We also need to decide whether we want to work with quantitative or qualitative data, or primary or secondary, because this will, of course, have an impact on the time and the resources that we require for the analysis. And how much do we want to involve stakeholders, no, in this mapping analysis? Again, it can be a rich exercise to do this kind of mapping in consultations, no, in coordination with others. But again, it will have its implications, no, the time and the resources you use, which are applicable to throughout the process. And finally, the system's boundaries. No? So when we are deciding, no, what parts of the system we want to analyze, like in the slide that I just showed, choosing to analyze the entirety of the elements of the system might be counterproductive. So it's important to define this from the start. And here is an example of a tool under development by FAO. And this is the analytical support mechanisms for agri-food systems, country programming, and evidence. And as you can see, this specific analysis has 3 levels. That includes the state of the current agri-food systems, the root causes of some of the challenges that have been identified in step 1, and step 3, in which they develop what they call game-changing solutions. And these are meant to be actionable solutions for the national policymakers. And this is just to show that methodologies can take different shapes, and of course the methodologies will need to be adapted to your needs. And you can find many of these tools in the guide. The third building block is entitled Nurturing Inclusive and Effective Collaboration. So once we have a group of diverse stakeholders, as we have seen in Module 1, and an understanding of the system, as we have seen in Module 2, this Module 3 provides guidelines to foster inclusive and effective collaboration. And to do this, we have 4 key ingredients. First, a governance structure with established rules and frameworks. The second ingredient is facilitation and communication, where the facilitator or group of facilitators must be able to stimulate constructive dialogue among the different stakeholders. Another ingredient is the management of power imbalances, which is essential to ensure that all participants can engage freely and openly. And a fourth ingredient, that is conflict management, which, as you can imagine, is very closely related to the other elements. So now we're going to delve a bit more into each of these ingredients. So in collaborative initiatives, the governance structure may include a steering committee, thematic working groups, and a support structure that assist with what we call secretarial tasks, such as organizing meetings, sharing agendas, and taking notes. And whatever the choice in the governance structure, this will, of course, need to have the approval from the members of the initiatives, and its design and operationalization should consider some important elements that you see in the screen. So bias, whether an intentional bias is at play when defining the roles in the governance structure. Inclusiveness, which is about considering potential quotas for certain constituencies. And also, sometimes it's useful to explore the idea of creating subcommittees to give leadership positions to traditionally underrepresented groups. Decision making, this is about how will decisions be made and by whom. So for example, in these collaborative initiatives, in these partnerships, majority voting as a decision-making system can create some frictions, especially among those holding the minority position, no, in the group. Another element that is important is consensus building. That could be an answer, no, to these decision-making processes. And consensus building is a process where allowing debate and being explicit about disagreements can help actors adjust their opinions or decisions towards a point that hopefully at the end ends up satisfying all the members. And obviously operations, so how administrative or routine decisions can be undertaken by a coordination unit. And this is very important. No? So we should also make sure that what's the balance, no, of these operations, and for example the secretariats that we create, to make sure that still important decisions are brought to the broader group. So the next ingredient, that's facilitation. Depending on the context, the facilitator and the format of the interactions or the meetings might need to vary. You know, so the facilitator should communicate fluently with all members of the group, and of course, facilitation is not always a one-person task. Sometimes you might need different individuals fulfilling different tasks. And I have added here this nice picture with the traits and skills that are desired in a professional facilitator. So we have neutrality, relational competencies, so be able to work with others, familiarity with different tools to develop the participants' common understanding. This would be like group dynamics, for example. Knowledge of methods to prevent or overcome conflicts, strategic communication, having this cultural and gender sensitivity. Obviously, knowing something about the matter that is being discussed. This person also has some technical background, and the ability to engage and to encourage participants to use systems thinking and strategic thinking. Now, on managing power imbalances, when some stakeholders don't have the capacity to participate on an equal basis, decision-making might be dominated by certain actors. And this could underpin the commitment of less powerful participants, and sometimes it can pose a risk to the long-term sustainability of the initiative. So we can manage these power imbalances in different levels. So at the initiative level, we can recognize and appraise the power imbalances, first of all, and then fill in the gaps in competencies and skills, and maybe also on resources of the different stakeholders. And in parallel, advocating for enabling environments that promote the engagement of underrepresented groups. Again, I think this is very relevant to the advocacy initiative that you will be working on as part of this program. And the fourth ingredient, that is conflict. As I said before, conflict is inevitable because different stakeholders will have different values, interests, and will be in different positions of power. And it can be approached in different ways, preventively and post-conflict. So preventively would be, for example, about developing a group identity, as this can build trust amongst actors and make it easier to navigate disagreements. But if conflict arises, we can apply synchronized de-escalation actions and mediation. An example of synchronized de-escalation would be a situation where one party offers a small concession as a gesture of good faith, and mediation could involve a third party considered as quote-unquote neutral, who can then apply different mediation techniques. And on to building block 4, which is about defining a compass and a roadmap. And this process would begin with the definition of common medium to long-term objectives through good group dynamics adapted to the context of the initiative, which is in itself actually an interesting activity, since often it is easier to agree on long-term goals rather than immediate actions. So achieving a consensus early on the long-term goals can have a very motivating impact in the group. And once this common vision is established, the theory of change would be articulated, which will help to discuss and visualize by the group the actions needed to move from the current situation, what we analyze in the module 2, to the desired situation. And as some of you might have experienced, developing theories of change can be a difficult task, especially for those that are not very familiar with organizational planning. So the facilitator could be creative in the way that is developed. And you can have a look at some of the tools that are recommended in the guide, such as a simple one like the SWOT analysis, the analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So from the strategy phase, we would move on to the implementation of the agreed actions, which will then need to be evaluated and learning from mistakes and successes fed back to the process to fix issues some necessary. And we have obviously some good practices on monitoring and evaluation and learning captured there. And this is an example that we have in the guide, which discusses how the Farmer to Market Alliance in East Africa analyzed its effectiveness compared to the theory of change that they had previously developed. So, for example, here the results showed where the alliance had played a key role in improving farmers' access to finance, increasing sales, and access to farm inputs and training. But it also showed challenges, especially related to improving specific actions. And on to the final building block entitled Securing the Sustainability of the Collaboration. And this will be my last slide. There are two elements that are interrelated and they are very important here. And they are institutionalization, difficult word, sorry, and financings. First, on institutionalization, collaborative initiatives that survive over time usually have a legal form that is adapted to the concept of the context of the partnership. And this could mean sometimes being embedded within an existing institution, or in occasions, it could involve creating a new one. And successful partnerships usually have a simple governance structure that is easily understood by external observers and, very importantly, accepted by the people and the organizations that make up the platform. A good example is Ireland, where a multi-stakeholder committee is convened every 5 to 10 years to develop the country's national agri-food strategy. It has a broad representation from across the sector, and despite various changes in government, the processes have been running for over 30 years. And in a study we conducted a few years ago, some of the elements that we kept hearing during interviews with members of the committee was the high level of ministerial buy-in and oversight of the process, as well as interesting factors, such as that secretarial support provided by the Department of Agriculture. And on financings, finally, initiatives, most likely than not, will require funds, right? Like everything requires money to work. So these initiatives will require funds to conduct things like operational support, program implementation, meetings, workshop, capacity building, outreach, and so on. And the funding can come from different sources and take also various forms. For example, in monetary modalities, we would have public or private grants, donor contributions, contributions from the members of the initiatives, alliances with NGOs, and it is also common to provide resources in kind. For example, one of the participating organizations could decide to carry out the facilitation, or even the secretariat work, the administrative work. So in general, the idea would be to implement a diversification strategy so that you don't need to rely on a single source and modality of financing, and also to ensure that all stakeholders have a clear idea of the income and expenses structure of the space. And a very interesting example here that we have highlighted in the guide is Organic Denmark. And this is an NGO that comprises around 200 members from the Danish organic food and agriculture industry. When it started, it only had 8 organizations, and it received some startup funding from the government. Now, a few years later, it has an annual budget of around 8 million euros that comes from both public and private sources, no? And it's mostly linked to projects. So if you are interested in it, I encourage you to have a look at the example in the guide. And this is everything. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Back to you, Ocean.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Pablo. Yeah, that was great to see and such a well explained approach to bringing all of these actors together that is essential to achieving the goals of projects that we have. And thanks for so clearly demonstrating and explaining the different building blocks and providing examples as well. I think that's very, very useful for all of our participants here as they continue to engage and develop their own careers and their own work within agri-food systems and how we can achieve, some of these objectives. So thanks very much. Well, now we've got about 10 minutes or so just under 10 minutes for the question and answer section. And thanks a lot, Pramisha, and thank you, Siobhan, for continuing to answer the questions that have been put in the Q&A function so far, as well as in the chat. So that's great, and do keep them coming in for all the participants here. So let us know if you have any more questions. But for now, I'll come to a couple of them. And I'm just looking at the ones that we have in the question answer section. Perhaps the first one then that we come to is from Juliet Ngozi Nkwaze. And it's looking at in regions like northern Nigeria, where insecurity, climate shocks, and limited access to finance affects smallholder farmers daily. How can multi-stakeholder collaboration move beyond policy discussions to create practical, locally led solutions, truly empower young people, especially young women, to lead transformation in agri-food systems? So, Siobhan, I'll direct that one to you if you want to open a mic and respond to that one.
Thank you so much, Oisin, and thank you, Julia, for this really great question. So yeah, I think this also refers to the fatigue maybe that I was speaking about as well in my earlier intervention, that a lot of discussions do go on and there can be fatigue around those discussions. And I think this is where the importance of evidence comes in, so that kind of conflicting agendas are not just speaking to one another, but that those conflicting agendas are informed by real data and real evidence. So that's where this kind of joined up thinking comes in, because you need the research and you need those institutions to have the capacity to be able to carry out that research, to inform those discussions and to take those policy discussions into strategy, and also to transform that strategy into, in a sense, a living process. So it's not just also about a policy discussion or a policy document, but that it's about a process that engages in a cyclical learning loop. So that, for instance, there is a potential to transform a local crop, for instance, cassava. There's a lot of cassava being farmed, but being lost at the district level, and so there's opportunities there to transform that cassava into cassava flour for local bakeries. But there's no data on that. Is that really a real market opportunity? How can you bring the technology in? And so that's where the research comes in, and then it begins a learning loop, and then that learning loop needs to go all the way up to government, so that there is real government support to support that type of idea. So joined up thinking across all levels and across all institutions, and that engage private sector, research and development, civil society and government.
Brilliant.
Great question.
Thanks a lot, Siobhan. Yeah, fantastic. And there are loads of great questions still coming in. So the next one, I was looking from Suleiman Abdurrahman Omer. Question is, how can youth-led platforms transition from project-based initiatives to system level change, and perhaps just from our side as well, we're looking at maybe supporting as well, getting involved with different organizations through the national youth chapters as well, and linking up with some participants or some other young people in your area as well, or in your country, that are interested in some of the work that you are doing. But I would like to also pose this question to Pablo as well. So Pablo, how can youth-led platforms transition from project-based initiatives to system-level change, and considering the multi-stakeholder collaboration approach?
Yeah, thank you, Noisin, and thank you, Suleiman, for the for the question. So all the above, no? It's you will need to evaluate, no? What's the system level change that you want to create? At the end of the day, the system level change come from the stacking up, no, of all these wonderful initiatives that take place in different parts of the system. So I would say find your niche. Where is the most value you can add based on the expertise of the group of this youth-led platform, and try to find key allies, so partners across your community. Go beyond those that you feel comfortable with, and partner with businesses. Try to find also connections between levels. So what I mentioned in the presentation about working from the local to the regional to the national, I think that that'll be key. Over.
Great. And yeah, I'd just reiterate as well that if you are interested in these transformations as well, and considering the work in your local country, the World Food Forum national chapters, perhaps there is one, perhaps there's not one, and if you are interested in setting up one, do contact our team. Perhaps we might have time for one, perhaps maybe two more. Next question, looking from Manar, and thanks a lot, Manar, for some great questions that you've posed in. And next one here, how can we move from representation to shared decision-making power within multi-stakeholder collaboration? So perhaps youth representation, considering there, and moving to shared decision-making power. Siobhan, if I want to pass that one to you.
Okay, I was in the middle of answering another one. So how can we move from shared decision making? So sorry, can you just repeat it? Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, so how can we move from representation to shared decision-making power using the multi-stakeholder collaboration approach?
Yeah, I think that's where the capacity building comes in. So because you do see certain instances where groups are represented, but really not represented to the best of their ability because of a lack of capacity. And I would also bring it around to because of a lack of evidence. So there may be ideas, there may be beliefs, but are those beliefs and are those agendas informed by data and evidence? And that if that data and evidence was shared, maybe there would be a change, in different agendas. So yeah, the capacity building, I think there is super important to move from that like representation, being at the table, because just being at the table does not necessarily mean that the real issues are on the table, because it depends how they're presented. It depends how they're followed up on. Are the issues that are presented on behalf of groups, do they make it into targets? Is there follow-up? So there's a lot there related to the capacity building of the representation of different groups. And there is a section on that in the guide.
Perfect. And yeah, I know we are coming very short on time, so we might have to wrap up the questions there, but that's a good point as well, just to reiterate that guide is there for you all to use, to engage with. And yeah, you can see that there's many practical case study examples as well of how you use the systems approach in agri-food systems, as well, and then explaining multi-stakeholder collaboration and systems governance as well. So with that, yeah, I want to just thank very much our colleagues from FAO's Agri-Food Systems Food Safety Division, to Siobhan Kelly, to Pablo Garcia Campos, to Parmisha Tapalia, as well as other colleagues who've supported the team, the ESF team, and as well to all of you for joining. So thank you very much. This is the first masterclass, as I said, this year in 2026, and we do look forward to seeing you all at many more of these masterclasses. We'll be sharing all of the content, so the presentation recordings and the chat as well, and the question and answer section with you all afterwards, so you can catch up with everything then. But yeah, thank you all very much. Thank you to our presenters. See you all very soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Oisin. Thanks, colleagues. Great session.